the calendar. House Bill 90, a bill to amend the Code of Virginia relating to possession of handguns by members of the Virginia National Guard. Report for the Committee on Militia, Police, and Public Safety with a substitute.
The gentleman from Virginia Beach, Mr. Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 90 simply allows for Virginia National Guardsmen who have valid Virginia concealed carry permits to be able to have those to be permitted in places such as recruitment centers and such. And there is a clause that allows for commanders to stop this if they reasonably believe that it impedes on training or operations.
The questions on adoption of the committee substitute. As many as favor that motion will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Substitute is agreed to. Gentleman from Loudoun, Mr. Bell.
Mr. Speaker, would the gentleman yield for a question?
Will the gentleman yield?
I yield.
Gentleman yields.
Mr. Speaker, I ask the gentleman if this legislation would prohibit commanding officers from ordering guardsmen under their command to carry a concealed weapon in mess halls, on flight lines, in classified facilities, sleeping quarters, or recreational areas at National Guard facilities where privately owned weapons are typically not allowed.
Mr. Speaker, I would answer the gentleman that there is a clause in the bill that allows for the commanders to say that if it impedes on training or exercises, most of which I believe that the gentleman said would fall under those categories, then they could stop doing so. This bill, the intent is, of course, to allow for citizen soldiers to have the same right as the gentleman has or I have. We have a concealed carry permit to protect themselves, their families, and those to the left and right.
Mr. Speaker, would the gentleman yield for an additional question?
Will the gentleman yield?
I yield.
Gentleman yields.
Mr. Speaker, I ask the gentleman if the legislation could unintentionally place a guardsman in a situation where they would violate uniform regulations by carrying a concealed weapon.
Mr. Speaker, I would answer the gentleman that in the legislation it says that this will not stop anything that federal law would prevent. I would also answer the gentleman with a story. On July 16, 2015, Mohammed Abdulaziz, inspired by radical Islam, opened fire on 2 military institutions in Chattanooga, Tennessee. His first target was a recruiting center. His second was a U.S. Navy Reserve Center. Approximately 100 rounds were fired altogether, and 5 soldiers were slain, 4 Marines, 1 Navy. Gunnery Sergeant Camden Myers, a Marine inside the center, shielded his young daughter from gunfire. "It was just like any other day," said Meyer. He had just arrived at the center with his daughter before it began. Mr. Speaker, I would say to the gentleman, everyone in this body, that we're just giving our citizen soldiers the same rights that we have to be able to protect themselves, their families, and the men and women to the left and right.
Mr. Speaker, speaking to the bill.
Gentleman has the floor.
Mr. Speaker, I understand the patron, what he's trying to protect, the men and women who are serving, and as a retired military officer, I share that intent. However, I'm concerned that the limited exceptions only for training and exercises takes away some of the commander's discretion. And also I'm concerned that the Virginia National Guard has spoken in opposition to this bill. And I ask that the members of this body consider supporting the members of the National Guard and their intentions, and that we not impair mission or get in the way of the commander's discretion, the commanders who we've entrusted to lead our troops. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, speaking of the bill.
The gentleman from Virginia Beach, Mr. Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just would like to say that we don't want to impede on commander's discretion, of course, but there is a separation of a civilian-led military. And furthermore, I believe that there's exceptions in the bill that allows for commanders to have discretion to be able to say that this impedes on exercises and or training. And lastly, Mr. Speaker, I would say that I hope the body would decide to support this and pass it and gross it to the third reading, because I understand who the commander-in-chief is of our National Guardsmen. And I would also implore everyone in this body to speak to National Guardsmen in their district and see what they think about it. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Shall the bill be engrossed and passed to its third reading? As many as favor that motion will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. No. The bill is engrossed and passed to its third reading.